All right, one other one I want to put up here on the board as something that is not as likely to be included in an idealist curriculum is art. And this might be initially surprising, but again, the rationale for this is fairly clear. If we think on the religious side of the divide, the great Western traditions in religion, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, the art traditions that come out of Judaism are fairly minimal. The art traditions that come out of Islam, again, are fairly minimal and tend to be focused only in the graphics direction. And even for the longest time in the Christian tradition, there was no such thing as an artistic tradition. In the early generations and centuries of Christianity, it was Christians who would in many cases be destroying works of art, banning theatrical productions on the grounds that they were blasphemous, and so forth. And it was a great compromise within the Christian tradition partway through the later medieval world that enabled a reintroduction of architecture that emphasized perceptual grandeur. If you think of the cathedrals that then came to be built, the use of stained glass windows and attending to the aesthetic issues there and the beauties that can come out of there. And those were seen as controversies. They were very hard fought and bitterly so. Within that tradition, and the rationale was that, well, we can open the door a little bit here for art as long as it is for the glory of God. If we think, for example, of stained glass windows, many of the people who are sitting in the churches and in the cathedrals are illiterate, and they're listening to a priest give the service in Latin, which they don't understand. While their minds are wandering, they might as well wander to beautiful stained glass windows in which there is represented, say, a biblical story, and so there's still some spiritual edification there as well. So in the Catholic tradition, once that controversy died down, a lively tradition in the visual arts developed, great cathedral buildings, stained glass windows, and it evolved then into fresco paintings and other kinds of painting and sculpture and so forth. Although interestingly, again, within the religious tradition, the same Christian religious tradition, it was the Protestant reformers in the 1500s who are reacting so strongly against that, going back to what they thought was a purer idealism, that one is not, as a religious person, concerned with the physical, with anything that appeals to the senses, that rather we turn our backs on the physical world and we direct our spirits toward the higher world. So in the religious idealist tradition, art always has been suspect. If you think also about music even, which can be very mathematical and can elevate the spirits, even that is controversial within the religious traditions, because music, the way it operates on us psychologically, seems to also influence our body. And so if I'm listening to some music and I like it, I might start tapping my fingers, start tapping my feet, I might get up and move around, and that leads to dancing, and dancing leads to boys and girls checking each other out, and that leads to eroticism and sexuality, and there again we're back into physicality again, and so we better close the door. No dancing. Dancing, that particular art, also can be suspect. But interestingly also, if you go to the non-religious side of idealism, there's also been a great deal of distrust for art as well. If we go back to Plato, for example, whom we looked at a little bit earlier in his great work, The Republic, his final book, Book 10, half of that book is devoted to an extended argument for strong censorship of the arts, an attack on the artists as corrupters of humankind, as pretenders to certain kinds of knowledge. And Plato has his character Socrates argue that there should not be any artists in the ideal city, including literary artists, that they would all be banned. Toward the end of that discussion, though, Plato does have Socrates open the door a little bit, arguing that some kinds of art might be permissible, but it has to be the kind of art that, as with the literature over here, meets certain moral standards. And so if the censors for the city do make the judgment that the art meets those idealistic moral standards appropriately, then certain kinds of art can be allowed and so forth. But if we use Plato as representative here, art always has been viewed with a suspicious eye from the tradition of idealism. Philosophically, of course, this makes sense if we think it through. If we think of the metaphysics, art is a physically embodied mode of communication or a mode of expression, and the idealists are not interested in physical embodiments. And their argument is that in principle, the higher world, the spiritual world, or the non-physical world, however we characterize it, it is not something that is capable of physical embodiment, and so by definition, art as a physical embodiment is just out of consideration, metaphysically speaking. If we think also of the divide epistemologically, art appeals to us sensuously. It appeals to our eyes. It appeals to our ears. In the case of sculptures that are well made, we want to touch them. Music moves our bodies, right, as well as our souls and so forth. And so it is epistemologically appealing to the sensory side of our nature. It can have an intellectual component, and it can have an emotional kind of component as well, but the center of gravity, so to speak, is certainly on the sensory side of things. And again, for the idealist, there is a divide between the lower sensory order and the higher rational order or the higher spiritual order. So again, art is going to be fairly suspect. If we think about ethical issues, the artists have a reputation for being laws unto themselves, to wanting to create their own universes, to be godlike. We prize artistic creativity. We prize the artist as going against the grain and being innovative, right, and so forth. And one of the things that we know is true of idealist ethics is that it's very much emphasizing duty, obligation, in many cases tradition, top-down authority, and so all of those moral traits that seem to be part and parcel of being an artist seem to be morally suspect, and so we just don't want to open those cans of worms. Particularly in younger students, we don't want to have their art lessons be do your own thing creatively your own way, Johnny and Susie. Instead, we're trying to spend as much time as we possibly can teaching them to be strict and obedient and to do their duty. Art lessons then seem to go against the grain. All right, so that's three curricular elements that I think would be rejected in mainstream idealism, mainstream principled idealism. It is true that there have been major compromises and evolutions within idealist traditions, particularly in the West as we've gotten further along into the modern world. But I think this is a good start on how to think through all of the various curricular elements from an idealist perspective. We could extend this exercise, and I'll leave this for homework or for independent thought here. How would we think about history, for example, if we were idealists? What would we say about foreign languages? Would we be interested in the teaching of economics being dealing with money and business, right, and so forth, go through the curriculum and make a decision, yes or no. Does it get on the idealist curriculum? Is it suspect and so to be excluded? Or is there more of a split decision? It could get on the curriculum, but it would have to be under certain circumstances. That's a fascinating exercise.